Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started now. Welcome to the Scripter and Surfer webinar. My name is Sabrina Pearson, and I've been with Golden Software for 16 years. We're here today to discuss using Scripter with Surfer. Currently, Voxler, Mapviewer, Grapher, and Surfer all include Scripter and can be controlled from a scripting environment. Some of the items we'll work through today can be used with those other programs as well, but today we're just going to focus on Surfer. I wanted to let you all know that we released Mapviewer 8 today as well. Mapviewer 8 has a wide variety of new features, some of which will probably appeal to you. After the webinar, I recommend checking out the demo version. You can just go to our website, which is goldensoftware.com, and click on the demo for it. It is fully operational from a script, so you can use the techniques we'll discuss today in Mapviewer 8 as well. So the issues I plan on discussing today are sample scripts and where to find them. So for example, you can find them on our website, in the samples directory, from the forums, or from the help file. And then we'll talk a little bit about combining those pieces. Then we'll move on to Surfer-specific items such as gridding and gridding options from the script. So we'll talk a little bit about the syntax and the various options for the grid data method. And then we'll talk about contouring options, how to create a contour, and how to edit the contour once it's created. And then we'll talk very generally about some simple loops, and we'll have a couple examples of those loops as well. After I discuss each section, I'll pause for a few minutes to answer any questions. You can send your questions to the webinar host via the chat function. Just type in your question and hit send, and it will be sent to the webinar host and forwarded on to me. Note, because some of the questions may be very specific and difficult to answer quickly, I may opt to answer them in email after the webinar. But go ahead and send them in anyway, and we will definitely respond to you later today. Hopefully we'll be able to answer a few of them, though. This webinar will also be recorded, so after the webinar ends, it will be uploaded to www.goldensoftware.com. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I'd like to discuss is where you can actually find a sample script. So I'm going to bring Scripter over. So this is the Scripter window, and it can definitely look daunting because it's completely blank. So the first thing I recommend to anybody writing a script is to start with some samples. The best place is honestly in the samples directory. So in Scripter you can click File, Open, and then I've gone to the Surfer directory here. So this is C:\program files /golden software /surfer12 /samples, and then in the samples directory there's actually a scripts folder. And Scripter comes pre-installed with all of these scripts here. So one of the ones that are probably, most popularly used is the grid data comparison. So this script will actually run and compare your data set with various gridding methods. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that script and click Open, and the script opens in the Scripter window. I recommend always taking a look at, both the green section, which is text that describes what the script is going to do, but also then kind of glancing through line by line in the script just to take a look at what it's actually doing. So at the top it says it tells you how to run it, so go to Script Run, select a data file, and then enter your columns. And if I look down here, I can see Surfer's opened, you get a data file, you set the columns, and then there's various gridding methods, and for every gridding method a contour map is created. So that right there adds the contour map. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Script Run. And for the data file prompt, I'm going to go ahead and select the demogrid.dat, which is a sample file included with Surfer, and click Open. For the X column, I'm just going to go ahead and use column 1 and click OK. For the Y column, I'm going to go ahead and click column 2 and click OK. And for the Z column, I'm going to go ahead and click column 3 and click OK. And then the script actually runs in a new Surfer window. and it creates all of these maps. So then you can kind of take a look at the various gridding methods and see which one looks best for your data set. It's a really quick and easy way to get a good look at multiple gridding methods. Other samples in the scripts directory walk through various map types. So for instance, the base map script actually goes through creating a base map and editing it. The class post map would actually create a class post map and edit that. And there's one of those for each map type. And then there's also some gridding options. So there's like grid blank, which walks through the process of how to blank a grid file. So this is a great place to start when you're creating a new script. There are also many full-length samples on our website, which is goldensoftware.com. The first site I'm going to show you is actually part of our Support Central. So this is goldensoftware.com/support/free scripts. We have free scripts for Surfer, Grapher, and Mapyart. And then in Surfer there's different versions as well. And then so what I would recommend is just kind of scroll through here when you're looking to create a new script and read the description, and more than likely you're going to find something that will aid you in writing your script. For example, there's gridding data scripts, creating map scripts, importing and exporting, and several options that include loops as well. So after we've run the previous script and we've determined which gridding method we want, maybe we want to use that gridding method to grid all of the data files in a particular directory. So I would come here and look over, and there's a script called gridall.bas, which says it grids all the specified types of data files in the specified directory. So that seems like a pretty good script. So I'm going to click on the name, and it actually opens in a text window. For most internet browsers. Some internet browsers will actually download the file completely. What you can then do is select everything, so Control-A, and then I'm just going to right-click Copy. And then back in my scripter window, I'm going to go File, New, and then highlight everything and Control-V to paste. And then again, take a look at what the script says it does. So this script says it grids all the specified type of data files in the specified directory. It says if you run the script and nothing appears to happen, make sure the file directory is valid, so that's good to know. And then at the bottom it has some common error messages described. Looks like it's going to grid the data.dat files, and it's looking for the data from C:\samples\data. So this is a good reason why it's a good idea to look at the samples. So I don't have this particular directory created, so I'm just going to change that directory to the Surfer samples directory. So program files, Golden Software, Surfer 12 samples. And because it had the backslash at the beginning before I started typing, I'm just going to make sure I leave that backslash in there. And then I'm just going to keep glancing over this to make sure there's nothing else that I need to set, and it doesn't look like it. Looks like it creates a data file and a grid file and then grids the data. And so if I were to click Script Run, a Surfer window will appear, grid the data. It actually did it so fast that you didn't see it. And then a grid file was created for each data file in that directory. At the bottom it says it actually prints the data files that were created or used to grid. And so up here I see all of these data files were actually gridded. And so if I would go and look for those grids, they would be in my samples directory now. So again, that's a really good way to start your script. Another great place to look is on our forums. So our forums are www.goldensoftware.com/forum, if I can spell. And so this is the forum website. There are script examples in the Surfer, Surfer Scripter, Grapher, Grapher Scripter, Map Viewer and Voxler directories. So you can click through any of these and just click on it and see what's there. Or you can actually search on the website. So when you're in a specific forum, you can click in the Search This Forum and type in information. So for instance, I might want to look up grid data and click Search. Then all of the forum topics that have grid data in it are going to be listed here. So if I just click on this top one, I can see that there is a user question and then some back and forth with other users and tech support at Golden Software. Usually we try to include some sample code when it's a scripter question. So this is a full set of code from the user and then a response from one of our tech members with how the particular question resolved itself. This is a great way to get both user interaction, if somebody else outside Golden Software answers your question, or just to find a sample snippet. You can also click at the very top in this search box, click the advanced search, and then you can search for a keyword and use it in multiple forums. So I'm just using the control key and clicking both Surfer and Surfer Scripter. And that'll give me information maybe about gridding data that's not just Scripter related, which is sometimes useful as well. And when you click search, then the searches that are found are going to be both from the Surfer Scripter forum, but also from the Surfer forum. Finally, another great place to look is actually in the samples in the help file. So from Scripter, you can choose Help, Surfer Automation Help, and this will open up the Surfer Help file already in the Surfer Automation directory. This introductory page kind of talks a little bit about Scripter. It also has a link to the Surfer Object Hierarchy page. The hierarchy page kind of lists the objects in the drill down order. If you click on any of the objects, for instance, if I click on ellipse, it'll show the properties and methods for the ellipse object. You can search in the help, so if you click on the search tab, you could type in something like grid data and hit enter, and it'll pull up information about the specific topic that you're looking for. Or in the contents tab, under the Surfer Automation book, there are several books here. The top several are more general information. The objects book has a list of all of the objects that are in Surfer. The list of methods and properties has a list of all of the available methods and properties. If you click on any object in this book, then that page opens. Okay, so are there any questions in general about sample scripts and how to find them? Okay, so it looks like there aren't really any general questions, so let's move on to the specifics, because I think that's what we're all here for. So the page that I'm going to go to now is grid data. So you've seen me kind of using the grid data as an example as I've been searching. So normally the way you would find a command in the program is very similar to, or in the help is very similar to the command that you're actually going to see. So in the program you would select grid data and select a data file, and then the grid data dialog appears. So in Scripter, the commands are going to be named very similarly. So in the list of methods and properties, I can go to grid data, and the grid data page contains all the information. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the information that's on these help pages, because these help pages have a lot of information that's there. At the top of every page is a brief description of what the command does. There's sometimes information up here that's relevant to how you use the command, other commands that need to be used in combination with the command. So just looking over this, the very first thing I see is that the grid data method is superseded by grid data 2. Okay, so when a method is superseded, that means you should no longer use this older method because a newer method has been created that addresses some problem that this one had. So in this case, the grid data 2 command was used specifically because multi-sheet Excel files are now supported. So I'm going to go ahead and click on grid data 2 instead. As you can see, the page looks very, very similar. The only change here would be the data file options, which allows you to specify the sheet in a multi-sheet Excel file. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this command. The other thing that you might see up here are links to other pages in the help. So it says it creates a grid, and if you click that, it goes to the grid data page. So if you're not sure if the command you're on is going to do the option that you're expecting, go ahead and look through these links as well, and it'll give you some ideas about what should happen from the program. The next section on this page always is a syntax section. So this lists how the command is reached, so it's reached through its parent object, and then you list the command name, which is grid data 2, and then these are all of the available options for the grid data 2 command. There are a lot of options, but most of the time these options aren't necessary, and it's only setting something that you would have set in the program. So below the syntax is actually a table that gives the name for each parameter, what type it is, so that's the programming type, whether it's required or optional, if there's a default, and a description. This is how most of the tables are set up. So for instance, the data file option is a string. That means it's going to be enclosed in quote marks. It is required, and it provides the path and file name of the XYZ data file. So that would be similar to when you click grid data in the program, this open data dialog appearing. So here we would select the grid file name or the data file name, and in Scripter we would select the data file name the same way. Some other parameters are optional, even though you may always be changing them. So in this case we have X column, Y column, and Z column, X call, Y call, Z call. These are long, which means it's expecting a number. They're optional. However, if your data is not in columns A, B, and C, which are the defaults, you are definitely going to want to include these options in your script to grid the data. Other options that are available, you can set the same things from the grid data dialog as you can in the script. So exclusion filtered, min-max, number of columns and rows, the algorithm. And next to all of these, it gives you additional information about what that option is. So for instance, next to xmin, it says this provides the grid line geometry minimum x value. And again, if you click on that, it takes you to the grid data table, and you can scroll down to where it talks about the minimum and maximum values to get an idea of what is expected. So I think it's time for an example. Suppose we want to grid the demogrid.dat data file with the modified Shepard's gridding method. So here for sure I know we're going to have to set the algorithm. Over on the right side it says SRF grid algorithm, so I'm going to click that, and it gives me a list of the available values. So I can see that SRF Shepard's is actually the modified Shepard's method. So I'm going to need to make sure that I set the algorithm to SRF Shepard's. So now, in the scripter window, I'm going to create a new script. And it was object.gridData2, and the data file I'm going to use was a string. And then the algorithm I was going to use was Shepard's, which was SRF Shepard's. So if I would try to run this, of course it's not going to run because Surfer isn't even initialized. So below all of the parameters in the help, there's usually a script that walks through the entire process. So this script opens Surfer, makes it visible, creates a plot window, and then grids the data. So I'm going to copy all this information and paste that in my script. And then I'm going to change the object so that it matches the Surfer application object. So now I've got surferapp.griddata2 with the file name and the algorithm. And if I click Run, it gives an error. The reason why it's giving an error is because I didn't tell Scripter what parameters I was setting. So whenever you get something like this, you go ahead and click OK and stop the script, and then go back to the help. So I just listed the first two parameters, which apparently was data file and xcolumn. Well, those weren't the ones I wanted to set. So what I really wanted to set was data file and algorithm. So Surfer uses you put the parameter name, so data file, and then colon equals, and then the string. And that tells it that the string name that you're listing is actually for the data file. Same way for the algorithm. I'm going to type the word algorithm, and then colon equals, and the method is SRF Shepard's. And now if I run the script, no error message is given, the script is run, a grid report is actually generated. So the script actually ran exactly like it was supposed to. There's nothing on the screen at this point because all I did was grid the data. As I mentioned, there are a lot of options for the grid data, including things like exclusion filter. This is similar to in the program. If you're going to grid data, clicking the filter data button. So if you often click the filter data, you're going to want to use an exclusion filter. In the help, it actually tells you what it's looking for, so this provides the Boolean search to use for the exclusion filter. So that would be the exact same information that you would put from here. Again, because it's looking for that exclusion filter text, you'd want to enclose that in quote marks. If you set your search radius, you're going to want to use the search enable. So this says it's a variant, which is true or false. So it's setting whether or not you use the search. So back in the program, that would be if you clicked advanced options and clicked on search and unchecked this box. If you set the search enabled to true, the box is checked. And then if you set it to false, then you would want to make sure that you set the other search options. And again, it kind of walks you through what's expected, but the real way to know, search radius 1 is to click on the information provided in the description and then also compare it to what you would actually be setting in the program. So if your search ellipse has a radius 1 option that's 5.7 and you wanted to set that in your script, then you would use the search rad 1 set to 5.7. Probably the most commonly used are the xmin, xmax, ymin, ymax, and the number of columns and rows. These are very similar to the grid line geometry section from the grid data dialog. So back in my script, if I want to add that information, I type a comma and then type whatever the parameter name was, so that's xmin, colon equals, and what I want that value to be. So I want it to be 1. Xmax, colon equals 7, and that would set the xmin and max values. Same for ymin and ymax. and number of columns and rows. And then after you click off the line, you can see that the options change color to show whether or not it's available. There are also specific options for specific gridding methods. So down in the bottom part of the options, there are kriging options, minimum curvature options, Shepard's contouring options, etc. So you would just, again, look at the option that you would normally set in the dialog. Maximum residual. So then I would go MC max residual. So the names are very similar. The option is set exactly as it is in the dialog. So are there any questions about the gridding commander syntax? It looks like somebody's asking how you can set the spacing. So the spacing actually can't be controlled from grid data, but you can kind of get around it by getting information from the data set. And this kind of goes with the second question that's coming in about the data set min and max values. So from the script, you can actually open a worksheet and get the data min and maxes and set a spacing. So I'm going to go ahead and just take that out for now. So if I wanted to open this line would open the Surfer worksheet, demogrid.dat in the worksheet window, and then I could actually read information from the worksheet. So for instance, data xmin would be equal to the worksheet dot columns. I know that my x data is in column 1, so I'm just going to put a 1 there. Dot statistics dot minimum. And again, all of this information is in the help, so you could actually walk through the help to find how you can find the data minimum. And then I'm going to copy that and alter it slightly to get the max. And then I could do the same thing with the ymin and ymax. And then the spacing, so if I did x spacing, could actually be based off of for instance, the data x, or the spacing would be a number. So for instance, if I wanted the spacing to be 1, then when I go to create the grid, when I go to grid the data, I actually am going to need to see the number of columns instead of the spacing. So then I have to calculate the number of columns based on that x spacing by using the data min and max. So my grid xmin would be equal to my spacing times the integer value of data xmin divided by my x spacing. And I'm going to copy that for the max as well. So my grid maximum value would be my spacing value times the integer of the data xmax divided by the x spacing. And I'm actually going to add 1 to that so that it rounds up, not down. And then my number of columns would be equal to 1 plus the grid xmax, which is this calculated value, minus the grid xmin, which is this calculated value. That gives me the range, and then I'm divided by the spacing. So that way when I do the grid data command, I'm actually going to set the number of columns and based on this calculated information. So I've got the data file name, and then I can set the numcolms to incol, which is what I defined that variable to be, and the xmin to the grid xmin, and similarly the xmax to the grid xmax. And if I were to run this script now, I'm setting those min and maximum and the number of columns so that my x spacing is the desired spacing. So hopefully this section answers the how do you get a data set max and min value. You would use the, open the worksheet and use the statistics method. Can you use an external file to list the parameters? You can. That's a little more detailed than I wanted to go into today. Basically, your text file would need to have a list of all of the parameters that you're wanting to set. Then you would have to read the text file in, assigning parameter names, kind of like gridxmin, to the value that you read from each row. Each row would need to be a separate parameter. So that's a little more detail than I'd like to get into in this webinar, but we can always get with you on email later on. And can a script prompt the user for an input value? Yes. So in that grid data comparison, one of the things it did was prompt for the file name. So we used the get file path to be prompted for a file name. And if you wanted to be prompted for an input value, for instance, the column in these cases, you could use val and then input box. And then the input box actually has the text that you define right here, and it has a default value as well. So if I wanted to be prompted in this most recent script instead for the spacing instead of typing it in, I could use that input val to be prompted for the spacing. Are there any other questions? Okay, so if you have a specific question about grid data, again, feel free to email me later on or contact us via tech support after the webinar. So the next option we're going to talk about is the contour map options. So this would allow you to create your grid file. Once your grid file is created, you want to create a map from it normally. So from talking to most users, we know that the contour map is the most commonly used map type. So in the program, after you grid the data, you would go to Map, New, Contour Map. And you'd select your data file and click Open. So this just creates a nice contour map from your data. The reason why I wanted to walk through the process is to kind of point out the difference between methods and properties and objects. So in the object manager in Surfer, you see there's a map object. That was created when I went to the map new command. If I went to map add, it actually would have added a layer. So the contours object is a layer from the map object. So that's kind of important to know when you're creating a script. And if you click on the contours map object, all of the properties and methods are actually listed in the property manager. So now that we have some terminology out of the way, we can look in the help and find information on the contour map. So as we just said, the contour map is an object. So in the Surfer automation book, you might want to click on the plus sign next to objects and then find the contour map object. This will open the contour map object page. It's very similar to grid data in that it has some information at the top. It then has all of the properties and methods that are available instead of options. So a method would have options that are available. An object has these property and methods. So all of these property and methods are similar to the properties and methods that you would find in Surfer in the property manager. So in addition to being able to make the contour map, normally you want to edit it in some way. So probably the most common edits are filling the contours, changing the contour interval, changing the contour line properties, or adding labels. So you can do all of these options in a script. So we're going to just kind of walk through the process of creating a contour map. Again, the easiest way to do it is to scroll down and see if there's an example. And there is a full example here. So I'm just going to copy from submain to insub and hit Control-C. And then I'm going to go back to my scripter window, and I'm going to go File, New to create a new script. And I'm going to paste what I just copied into this window. So now let's look at the individual lines. So the very beginning of the script opens Surfer and then makes it visible. The next section says dim plot as object and set plot equal to a new window. So that's like going to File, New in the program. The next section sets up the shapes object. So shapes is a collection of objects that controls all of the actual drawn objects in Surfer. And then the next section says dim map frame. So that means we're going to create a map frame. The map frame is similar to clicking on map in the object manager in the program. And as you can see, we've got set map frame equals shapes dot add contour map, and then the contour map that's going to be created is going to be from the demogrid.grid file. And then we've got a section called that declares the contour map as an object and sets the contour map equal to the overlays, overlay 1 specifically. So the overlay is the layer. So the bottommost layer is layer 1, so that would be mapframe.overlays1. If we had multiple contour maps overlaid, you could have mapframe.overlays 2 or 3, etc. Okay, so now that we have this example, if I were to run this example, a contour map is going to be created. And as you can see, it's got all the default properties. So just by copying and pasting the script, we were able to come up with a default map, which is great, but we want to do some modification of it. So to the script, I'm going to add a couple options. So the first option I mentioned being very common is to fill the contours. So I'm going to go back to the help and look in this list of properties for something that looks similar to how I would fill it in the program. So as a reminder, in the program you would click on the contour map, and on the Levels tab click the Fill Contours box. And then after you click the Fill Contours, you would probably also change the color scale to something like rainbow. So in the script, or in the help, I'm going to look for something similar to that, so fill contours. Again, most option names are kind of mushed together from the words in the program. So fill contours is actually what I would look for initially, and there is a command called fill contours. So if I click on that, at the top it tells me what it does. It has a Boolean value, which means true, false. So if it's set to true, the area between the contour lines are filled with colors. It's awesome. It's exactly what I want. So I'm just going to actually copy and paste this line where it sets it to true and paste it into our script. Now if I run this, I can see that the map that's created is actually a grayscale map. So I also want to change that color. So again, I go back to the help, go back to the contour map page. So this is the contour map object. And now I'm going to be looking for something that allows me to set the colors. So there's actually fill foreground color map, which is similar to in the program setting the fill colors. Not quite the same wording, but it looks similar enough that I might click on it. And then I'd read the description. It applies the color map for the contour map. It's exactly what I want. So I'm just going to copy and paste this line again into my script. So that loads the rainbow color map and assigns the colors to that, which is great. If I were to run the script now, I would still see only a black and white contour map. That's because it has a remark section here that says after you set the color map, you actually need to use the apply fill to levels. So it's really important to read all of the information on the page when you're setting an option. So I'm going to click apply fill to levels and look at what it says. It says it applies the fill to first index, number to set, number to skip. So that is very similar to in the program. I'm clicking this foreground color option and setting these affected levels. So without setting the affected levels, no color change is actually going to be made. So I'm going to copy the apply fill to levels and paste it into my script. Now this says first index is 1, which that would be the first contour line, which is good. Number to set 2, number to skip 1. So that means I would only be seeing fill for 2 contour lines in a row, and then it would skip a contour line. And I don't want that. So I want to change that to 1 and that to 0. And again, that logic comes from the same logic in the program. So if you use that apply section in the program, you would use it exactly the same here. And if I run this, I'm going to see a contour map is created. It was changed initially black and white, and then it changed to color using the rainbow color pattern. Okay, so that uses the default contour interval, which may or may not be what you're looking for. So this particular contour interval has an interval of 5. So perhaps we wanted something like 7 or 10 units between the contour intervals. So then we'd want to change the contour interval in addition to applying the color fill. So unless you know the option name, you go back to the help, and from the help you're looking to go back to the contour map object and look for something that describes changing the levels. So there's a levels option, and I would click that, and then I can see here it's got a sample script that will, or a sample snippet that will set the levels and then auto-generate them. Okay, so again, I'm just going to copy and paste that into my script. This sets the minimum level to 0, the maximum level to 100, and the interval to 10. So I'm going to change that interval to 7, the maximum level to 120, and then I'm actually going to move all of this information up above the fill contours because I want to make sure that my levels are set before I fill them. And if I were to run this script and take a look, you can see that the level interval is 7. Now one thing you'll notice is that every time I come into Surfer, I set that level method to advanced before I look at any changes. And the reason for that is all of the scripting options are actually controlling the advanced options as opposed to the simple options. So when I just changed this back to simple, you can see that it changed back to this default 20 to 105 with a contour interval of 5. So make sure before you change any options in Surfer, you click advanced and edit levels first. Okay, so that would set the contour interval for us. We might also want to change some line properties. I'm going to kind of speed up just a little bit so that we can get to the loops before we run out of time. Basically, the levels property gives you a levels collection. A collection is similar to an object. So in the levels collection, you're controlling an individual contour level line. So for instance, if I wanted to control the second or third contour interval, or the 7th, I would go through the levels property, and from the levels property, select an item. Each item would then return a level object, so that would give me, for instance, only that particular level line that I'm looking at. Again, I'm just going to look at this sample down here, and this says it's assigning to the 7th level line using levels and then a number 7. So in my script, I'm going to have contour map dot levels 7 using the same idea that they have here. and then I can go to the line options, and from the line I can set foreground color, RGB color equals SRF color brown, for instance. So I'm only going to copy from .line. So I'm going to this particular level, setting the line properties to this color. And I'm going to change that to color red just so it stands out. The line is actually way down here because the 7th line is actually so low in the Z values. So that would allow you to change a single line. And so this is where loops come in handy. So I'm just going to skip ahead to loops so that we can talk about how you would change individual items like this in a more combined way. So this level will assign just that single level. But if we wanted all of the levels and the whole contour map to change, you could individually set them. So you could have levels 1.line.foreground color, levels 2.line.foreground color, levels 3, etc. Or you can loop through a variable that will automatically change that number. This is way easier, and then you need to know a little bit less about the contour map. So the easiest loop is a for next loop. So I'm going to type for I equals 1 to 20 and hit enter, and it adds next automatically. And then I'm going to copy this line and put it inside my for next. And instead of setting a level specific number, I'm going to set it to I. So when it enters the loop the first time, I will be 1. It'll set the first level line to red, and then it'll go next and set the second line to red, third line to red, etc. This works great if you know the exact number of contour lines that you have. So when I click run on this, you can see I'm given a bad index error message. What that means is it looped through all of the lines and it reached a point where there were no more lines. So the I value is actually higher than the number of levels. So if I click OK and stop it, I'm going to now change the 20 to loop it on the number of levels. So back in the help, on the levels collection, there's actually a command called count, and that gives the number of levels in the collection. So if I change 20 to contour map .levels .count, now it will go from 1, and it'll add a number 1 each time, so 1, 2, 3, and it'll only go to the maximum number of contour level lines. Most collections have some type of count variable. So if you're changing the number of axes, you could have axes.count. If you're changing all of the map layers, you could have mapframe.layers.count or something like that. So there's always going to be a method there that will allow you to do that. And if I click run, the script runs and all of the contour lines are changed to red with no error message. The for next loop is my favorite type of loop. I use it a lot, probably too much, but it's easy. It's very simple. You're going to get an error message if its bounds are out of place. So it's a good one to start with, especially if you're changing a lot of options. The similar logic can be used with an if statement. So an if statement is similar to a for next, except that it's testing for some type of bounds. So I'm going to say if something is true, then, and again it shows you that it adds the end if, which is the end, similar to next, and then it gives you space to add in some commands. So for instance, if I wanted to have a major contour interval that created thicker lines than the rest of the minor contour intervals, and I wanted that to only happen if my contour interval could be divided by 5, for instance, we can go ahead and add in this if statement. So the if I'm going to want, the something true, is going to be if the contour map dot levels .item j, it's just a new loop variable that I'm going to create, .line.width, sorry, okay, so if the item value, so that's giving me the z value for the contour line, and that value command is found in the help again. I'm just kind of speeding up a little bit. So you can see that on the level object there's a value option. So I'm just using that value, and then I'm going to use a Visual Basic command called mod 5. So this says if the z value is divisible by 5 evenly, so there's no remainder, so it'll give me a 5, a 10, 15, 20, etc. Then I'm going to do this. So this statement will only be entered if this is true. So on line number with a z value of 7, you won't go inside this if. And then the option I'm going to change is the line width. And I'm going to make it a really thick line so it stands out. And so I've got the end if, and then I'm going to do this exactly the same way I did this for next. So I'm just going to copy that for, and put a next. So this is going to loop through all of the levels in the entire map. And when I run it, the contour map that's created goes through every individual level and will thicken only a line that has a value that's divisible by 5. If I change the variable properly. So this still, I copied an I and I used a J down here. I, J, K, they're just looping variables. You can use anything you want. Better. Okay, so then I run it and it creates a thick line, and that line is divisible by 5. So that would be a way to get an index line. Are there any questions about how to loop? I know I kind of covered that really fast. So somebody's asking if they can grid their data and create a contour map in a loop. Yes, so that grid data comparison had a really great example of, or I'm sorry, not grid data comparison, the one that we copied from the website GridAll. This creates a grid file for every data file. So inside this while loop, before the while end, you can add a statement in here that would create the contour map and change all the properties of the contour map. It would just be a way to combine all of the individual pieces. Are there any other questions? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any other questions right now. So that will conclude our webinar. As always, if you have any questions about Surfer, Grapher, Voxler, Digermap, your Stratter, or Scripter, please give us a call or contact us via email. Honestly, it's usually much easier to answer Scripter questions in email than in live chat or on the phone. So I would recommend emailing, and when you do, please include your script, any data files, grid files, etc. that would be needed to run your script. If your questions are pretty simple, like I don't know how to do this, please send it to us. We'd love to help you get using Scripter and make your process a little bit faster. And if you have any other questions, please contact us.